and I sat down, like, thinking we're going to do a parenting class. These guys are going to leave. And his ex came into the room, and I don't know where it came from, man, because this guy was like 350, 400 pounds, but he pulled a blow dart gun out from underneath himself and picked it up and shot his ex with it right in the neck, man. It was crazy.
While you were there?
Oh, yeah, man. It was crazy. It was probably the craziest situation I've been in.
Welcome to Creepalachia. We are talking community forums in this episode with our famous guests, especially here in Raleigh County. Sleazy Shane, thank you for joining the studio, sir.
You. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So we're talking about Sleazy News, people. And for those who don't know, Sleazy News is kind of a community forum, would you call it? Well, how would you describe it to someone who does not know anything?
It's really turned into a community forum, I guess. It's really supposed to be something that's all over. So Sleazy News from everywhere, but our user base is mainly here in Beckley. So, that's community forums, what it is.
So what gave you the idea? Like, you're sitting around like, I have this idea. Let's see if we can figure it out.
Yeah. So really was an idea. There was no idea there. It was just, one day I kept running into things, and, I got lucky enough to see some really weird stuff. So the biggest being, I guess, in 2018, I ran into a guy who had jumped onto the back of his girlfriend's vehicle. I followed him through Beckley, and that went viral. And then after that, I got attacked by someone who was under the influence in front of a daycare. It was a lady, but it was comical. So, right. It kind of took off, and then it was just one thing after the other. And then there was an incident in 2022 where a gentleman was shot by the mall. And,
yeah, I remember. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So whenever that footage came to me, I posted it, and I just put it, it was just an idea, Sleazy News, threw it under that page, and it just took off. So, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Everybody was, at first, everybody was kind of allowed to just post whatever they wanted, and then before I really started to moderate it. So,
sure.
A lot of stuff. I
imagine moderation came in pretty early on because like, whoa, because people can get a little crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It took off pretty quick, which, I still moderate it by myself, but that's why a lot of stuff goes under the radar. But a lot of people were posting stuff that I didn't agree with, so we kind of had to get a hold of that and just keep it from being put on there. Stuff with homeless people sleeping and stuff like that. So
sure. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Like, because I know there's a lot of posts that involve the addicted community and different things of people doing things that definitely don't paint them in a good light. Now, granted, they're making bad decisions, right, obviously. How do you personally feel about that? How can we have an important conversation, laugh, but also, understand that what we're watching here is not normal. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So initially, we would have people who were hung over rails and, laying on sidewalks and stuff like that, who were passed out from drug addict, just doing drugs and stuff. But I felt like, at first it was kind of a shock to people, because people would see it, but people really didn't know that it was so prevalent in our area. But once I seen how it was kind of affecting some people, I kind of limited the amount of content that I allowed onto the page in terms of the addicts and stuff. But it's in my opinion that if you are out in the community stripping down naked, urinating on the road, doing tweaker stuff,
sure, I'm
not going to keep it off the page. At that point, there does need to be kind of like a checks and balance for people. They need to understand that, you go out and do these things, that it's, everybody has a phone. Everybody can record this stuff. So we just have somewhere that we can now see it.
Yeah. Well, and two, I think the shock value is, a lot of us go through our daily lives and we may not know certain things exist. Now, granted, they're often found humorous, even though we're witnessing someone have a mental breakdown, essentially. But it kind of gives you an awareness of like, hey, also, if you're not on drugs yet, eventually,
right,
this could be an issue.
Right.
So it could be a deterrent.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. And you would be shocked at the amount of people who did not realize that these things go on in our community. They had no idea that people were doing the things that they were doing, that there were, camps of homeless who were, going around town stealing and doing drugs and right beside the volleys. People didn't know that. So it did make people more aware, and it continues to do so. There were shootings every day. We had that a couple summers ago. There were shootings almost every night, gang violence, stuff like that really wasn't being reported on. So we were getting, that footage straight out to the people, and they were seeing it, and it kind of opened up the eyes of a lot of people as to why, our local media wasn't following any of this stuff, and that, that they were able to get that information off of Facebook.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And in 2 short years, you're almost up to 40,000 members, which is a lot for a Facebook group. And to clarify, like you haven't really monetized any of this, right? It's
it's a group page. It's not like a page that I can monetize. My own Facebook is monetized, but I don't really make anything off of it. It just, has the professional dashboard and stuff like that. But I don't make anything from it. I don't sell merchandise yet.
Sure.
People have asked for it. So that's something I may do, but
well, at the same time, it takes a lot of work. Like I know just the short time I've had Creepalachia going for 3 months, like how do you literally stop looking at your phone? I need some advice on,
right.
Because right now my screen time is high. I'll say it's like 6.5 hours.
Oh yeah.
And I'm trying to lower that.
Right.
Have you figured it out? But
man, I don't know. Like there are days that in weeks where there's a lot going on, and a lot of people are hitting me up or tagging me in things, and I'm trying to sift through information, and I've made mistakes. I've called out things that I quickly find out that it's not real. I hate to report on murders and stuff like that comes out someone wasn't murdered. I try to get my sources correct. Everybody, get with me. And I do have some people on the inside that help out a lot, and they do. And, they watch the page too, because there are criminals that are on the page. So, it helps.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. And to clarify, like, I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm assuming you don't either.
No.
Okay.
No. This was all supposed to be satire, man. It was just supposed to be for fun,
Yeah. And, now granted, Josie that comes on here, she's an actual journalist. So when we do serious stuff, I try to be a little more careful. Obviously, I'm here for the comedic value, I think.
Right.
But yeah. So did you start to see... Have you ever gotten feedback that kind of made you worry from the community, or has there?
Oh yeah, I've had death threats, man. Like more than a few. People who say that they're gonna catch me out and shoot me, or beat me up or whatever. So I'm always paranoid and ready,
right.
I guess you could say. So I'm always kind of watching my back just in case. So, but it's few and far between for the 5 or 6 death threats that I've received. Hundreds of people have seen me out in the community and talked to me about the page and how they love the page and, how they enjoy getting, news from the page. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I haven't had any death threats yet. Hopefully they'll never come, but I've had a couple things where people weren't too happy that really we were reporting the truth.
Right.
But like you mentioned, it's a landslide of other people would message and say, "Oh, thank you so much for, this and that and blah, blah."
Right.
So that definitely makes it well worth it. So, how you mentioned those viral videos early on, how did you what's your definition of viral? Did your phone just keep lighting up, or how did you know whoa, this is different?
Yeah. So the first one had, several million views. And, I was approached by some of these companies like Viral Hog, for instance, that, wanted to take it, and give me like 25% of the profit, which I did that, and it was picked up by like Comedy Central, just a couple other different news agencies, so that's viral to me, like big viral, national, international, whatever. So.
Yeah. I've had a couple of go like county viral, we'll say, or like,
yeah.
But when that stuff starts happening, which TikTok, we've had a couple get like a couple 100,000. We haven't had anything really hit heavy yet.
Right. TikTok doesn't like me. It's Sleazy News isn't good for TikTok. They throw the stuff down pretty quick.
Yeah, I know. It seems more monitored. I've had a lot more videos flagged on TikTok than anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like I know they say it's Chinese spyware, but I haven't really noticed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it happens instantly for me sometimes. It's crazy. So, I mean, I would love to involve the page into TikTok more. So maybe we can try that later on, but so far, no luck.
Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out that process too. So I'm on the page. So we got 38,400 members. If you're on Facebook, follow Sleazy News, join the group. Do you approve people joining, or can anyone just
anybody can join? And it's pretty good about self-moderating and keeping the spam out. So far so good. We haven't had a bunch of people jumping in and making spam posts and comments and stuff. So it's been pretty good so far.
Have there been any instances where you like, hey, we did something good here, where you saw something from the beginning to the end? Maybe you provided some information that helped some kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, the dog posts are huge right now. We've helped a lot of animals that have been needed rescued, and that's a big thing. And we've also helped to there's some people who went around shoplifting or car thefts, stuff like that. It's a pretty good way for people to just kind of inform everybody else. I know there's a couple other pages like that. That's why I kind of like include, I'd like to include more comedy, just to kind of make people happy. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's, not only informing the community, but there are things that have helped people to find help for their dog or whatever, so
sure.
It's not always sleazy, but whatever.
Yeah. I kind of see Sleazy News as the Comedy Central version of J&J News, the one in Mercer County.
Perfect example, man. Perfect example.
Yeah, so it's like the satirical version.
Right.
Yeah, but also does some good. So let's talk about, I don't know how much you want to get involved with what you do personally, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in Glen Daniel. Yeah. So a little community called Holly Hills. It's Fairdale, Glen Daniel. Lived there until I moved out. And after I graduated, I moved to Cleveland and then Atlanta. Moved back here 20 plus years ago and never left. So wanted to leave. Now it's just, West Virginia's kind of grown on me, I guess, as I've gotten older. So just like everybody else. So
sure. Yeah. What kind of occupation did you get into for a living, or did you have kind of a plan coming out of school or anything like that?
No plan at all. I was a troublemaker in school. So I went to alternative school and, all that different stuff. And then when I graduated, got married right out of high school, had some kids, straightened up, went into college, got a degree in psychology. And then from that point, just kind of, I've gotten to the, with res care. I worked in the houses at res care for a while with special needs folks. And then I did behavior support with those guys for several years, and then jumped into what I do now. I contract with the state doing CPS stuff. So I don't work for CPS. I just do contract work, through the state. So,
oh, okay. Yeah. So do you take on certain cases, or do you provide certain services for individuals, or? So
I'll take cases that the state will refer me, they'll refer the company I'm with, and they'll send a referral over, and then I'll do like parenting adult life skills with the parents. This is normally cases where the kids have been taken out of the home, and I'll work directly with the parents and just try to help them to get back on track and just work on any parenting deficits that they may have or any life skill deficits. There are people who don't know how to pay their bills. There are people who don't know how to really, live life, and be successful at all. So I'll help them to get to that point.
Man, this is why I love this show, because I purposely do no research.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is so cool to me that that's actually, how you earn a living is you're involved with a lot of these issues.
Oh, yeah.
That are so important in West Virginia that, often we're looked down upon by outsiders. But at the same time, I love talking to people who are actively involved in trying to fix things, because I think life skills, like you mentioned, we're so worried about kids going to college. To me, it's like, teach them how to, have a checking account first.
Exactly.
You
wouldn't believe the amount of adults who don't know how to do any of that. They don't know how to properly discipline their children. They don't know how to, and when I say properly discipline, I don't mean to, a lot of people, there's whipping kids and stuff like that. It's nothing like that. It's more like showing them how to communicate, showing them how to work with their kid one-on-one, because they're at a point now to where CPS has had to step in and take the kids out of the home. And most often that's because of drug issues. So most of the people that I work with, are former drug addicts who are trying to save their family. So
what's it like witnessing? Can you tell when someone is taking it serious versus they're just going through the motions? Like, can you kind of tell, like, oh, well, they've
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You can immediately tell who wants to be a part of their kid's life and who don't. And I've seen people go through the entire process and get to the end of the process to where they'll get their kids back and then relapse back on drugs. And that's not to say that they don't want their children, but that just goes to show that, drugs are, it dominates their mind regardless of circumstance. So, but there are people who definitely, and most often people do want their kids and people do want to be a part of their kids' life, and then there are people who lose their kids and then come out of their addiction and, kind of wake up and are like, oh my God, now what? So, the state has a very lengthy process, which they're trying to change that now, but it takes, anywhere from 6 to 15, 18 months for them to go through that process. And it's long and it's drawn out, but it's necessary, so the state continues to revamp it. And West Virginia, we have one of the higher rates of foster care. And, a lot of these children are, living in their grandparents' home. I think something like 87% of kids a couple years ago were living with their grandparents in Braxton County.
Oh, wow. I know McDowell was at least 50% for, kids were living with their grandparents.
Right. Yeah. So families get the first option now. They try to place with families. And if they can't do that, and they can't find their foster home, because we are very, very short on foster homes in the state, then they're housed in hotels with staff. And it's not the best situation, but it's something that, we do. And that's just to make sure that they're, cared for and not just thrown out. So,
yeah. What's some of the main issues that you run into regularly that Southern West Virginia is facing as far as, living situations, things like
poverty
that?
And drugs, man. That's the worst thing. I've been in situations and into homes that people wouldn't believe. My very first case, which was years ago, I walked up to this house, and it was very rural, and went around the back, and this girl was staying with her two children in the bottom level, and her dad lived on the top level. And when I came around, there was a 5-gallon bucket, with feces in it, and that's what they were using. And I walked in, and it was disgusting. The children were in the back, had their heads shaved, 2 and 3 years old, because they had lice so bad. They were laying on looked like a mattress that came out of a slate dump, and I've been in situations where I've went into homes and, they were actively cooking meth in the house when I walked in. Walked into a house one day, and there was a guy who was he was paralyzed from the waist down. He was a father, and he was in a bed, and in the back room, it was midwinter. Half the trailer didn't have power, and he was in the one room that did have power, and there was nobody there to help him. And they sent me there to do parenting with the guy, and I worked on it with him and done what I could, but he was in the pins, and he couldn't change himself. He had no one there to help him. I had to help him out, because these people were in this complete poverty. But come to find out, he was one of the biggest meth dealers in that area. So come back a week later to work with him. He had been rolled out to the front room, and I walk in, and there's several people in the room, and I sat down, thinking we're going to do a parenting class. These guys are going to leave. And his ex came into the room, and I don't know where it came from, man, because this guy was like 350, 400 pounds, but he pulled a blow dart gun out from underneath himself, and picked it up and shot his ex with it right in the neck, man. It was crazy.
While you were there?
Oh, yeah, man. It was crazy. It was probably the craziest situation I've been in. And she was just like, yeah. And I'm just.
What did you tackle him, or what do you do in that situation? Like,
man, I just, I grew up around a lot of people a lot of situations like that. So it didn't like blow my mind. I wasn't like, oh my God, and run, but I was kind of blown away.
Hold on. So a blow dart gun is not like a little Derringer or something.
It was like as long as his leg, man.
Dude. And he just had it like hidden, like, okay. Well,
yeah. So apparently he had the meth underneath him too, and he would bring it out and he was selling it. That's how all of this led to him being caught doing this. This has been 10 years ago, man. And he they put him in prison, and I mean, he couldn't walk. He was paralyzed because he had been doing drugs, and I guess something had become infected, and it went into his spinal cord, and that was it. That's nuts.
So he died?
No, I think he's still in prison.
Okay.
Honestly.
Is she okay?
Yeah. She got, actually years later, she had she had gotten pregnant again and had another baby. And in our state, that if you've had an open case or terminated, your rights have been terminated. If you're pregnant, as soon as you have the baby, a case opens. So, years later, I ended up being on this case, and she'd cleaned up, got herself together. So.
Dude, that's bananas.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed in 100 guesses, like, here's what happens.
Yeah.
That's nuts. So do you think maybe Sleazy is a way for you not to lose your mind on, like, maybe you're trying to,
yeah.
I mean, because you're not making fun of these people. You're making fun of the situation,
right?
Kind of making lighthearted of it, because it's very depressing.
It is. And, the homeless folks, they're not going back on Sleazy. I'm not letting that happen again. And I felt that there was a point to where it was becoming overwhelming for the community, because they not only were here and they were being bussed in here. We all know that, they were bringing them in from different towns and stuff, and they were getting here themselves. But we were seeing them on every street corner. They were holding the signs up. They were, and what got me was, I was watching them, at one point there was a lady that sat at the bottom of Harper Road, and she had the walker, and I watched her do a drug deal right there, and that's really when it kind of dawned on me. We need to at least let the community know. I know you're thinking that you're doing something good for somebody, but they're taking this money and they're buying dope with it. So
that's a good point. The thing is what I try to think about is the handful of people in all these people or more that are actually good people that are needing help. And then you have people that are taking advantage of, like I've heard there's like this big panhandling ring and all of this money goes to one certain place and all kinds of different things.
I don't know. I think most of it, they are panhandlers that work together, but I don't think there's a giant ring.
Okay, gotcha.
That's going on. I think that it's mainly just groups of people who work together to try to, put their money together to get their fix. I do want to point out that the lady who on the walker that I just brought up, she did go to rehab and she's doing really well.
Oh, so that's great.
So that's another good story. So
yeah, well, and too, like I've seen where there's a walker at a certain stop and then it's like shifts, like this person will go up and then pick up the sign and then they'll switch out. But I try not to get too negative on people like that. First off, their life most likely sucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, get a job. It's like he's sitting out in the weather for 10, 12 hours. And I see the guy in the wheelchair without legs and he's, obviously having a rough life.
Right.
So I try to put that in the forefront of like, well, they may have left their trash on the ground, but at the same time, like they're having a really tough time.
Right. And and a lot of these guys, I've stopped and talked to quite a few of them, and they'll openly admit that they're addicted to drugs. Some of them don't. Some of them still, they're in the closet when it comes to their drug use, and they don't want people to know about it, even though we know. But I try not to be heartless, man. I lost my brother to addiction in 2012, and it's since high school over 50 friends from school, dead from addiction, from overdoses. So I understand, how it affects families. I understand, a lot of people, that's the first thing they want to say is, what if it was your brother? What if it was your mother? Well, for me, I wouldn't care, because I would really hope that it would be a wake up call, because sometimes people need to see themselves, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
That's a good point. Yeah. And, I'm sure, majority of people listening have, like, I lost pretty much a best friend several years ago and he cleaned himself up. He was doing good. And then just one night they had a party and someone gave him a pill. And he did this, he took this pill or whatever, and then he didn't wake up.
Right. It's just like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
He OD'd before. And we were just telling him, and he just kept saying, like, I've took way more than that. I don't know how.
Yeah. That's the big, people just forget that. I've had family who were so addicted that they would carry Narcan, and they would intentionally overdose themselves, and just so their partner could, Narcan them like 20 minutes later so they didn't die. And then the other one would do it. It's nuts.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I've heard of people getting Narcan and getting mad when they get woke up.
Yeah. I took a family member had to rush him to Bar H. Found him. He was out. Rushed him over to Bar H, and he was barely breathing. They took him in the back. We're working on him. Gave him the Narcan drip, and within a minute, I guess, his eyes opened up, and he was like, "Who gave me Narcan?" He knew who did this, who took me out of this, this bliss that I was in.
Whoa.
So it's crazy.
That's nuts. And Narcan, for people who may not know, it blocks the, I don't know if receptors is the word. It blocks certain things involving the high of the pill or whatever to bring them back to life. Maybe it gives them some adrenaline. I'm not even going to act like I'm a doctor, but essentially that's what it does. Is it takes away the high and brings them back.
Right.
So, as far as Sleazy News goes, like what are there any future plans with it, or is it kind of you're in the swing of things, like here's my process? Or
yeah, man, so it's kind of taken on a world of its own. Kind of runs itself. People just post stuff. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't come up. I think there's like 700 plus pending posts, which I want to apologize to anyone who has a post that sometimes they're like, people will post the same thing and share the same content, and that doesn't go up. It gets hit a lot with community guidelines violations. So I have to be very careful on what I let in there, because Facebook will, take it down and it will flag the group. And the group has been at risk of being shut down, a lot. So I have to keep it, I have to keep it tame. Like there are a lot of, I had started a Snapchat just because I had seen a lot of videos were coming from Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I started a Snapchat, but I ended up just getting a bunch of fight videos from like junior high and high school. So things I'm not going to post, So,
Sure.
I try not to post too many fight videos because those get flagged, but you also have other pages that are, based on fights. So that don't get flagged. So I just have to be careful on what content I put in there.
Yeah. Yeah. You was talking about the guy who, you're talking about the guy who got shot at the mall, right?
Yeah.
The road.
Yeah.
Now I remember when that happened, and I think one thing that's important for forums like yours is discussion and having discussions about certain things. And that was one that really lit up both sides of the coin.
Right.
I guess you could
that was
say.
big. That was a big one. Because we had never had anything like that in this area. You see that on YouTube, you see it on TikTok, and especially in the midst of the shootings that happen with police officers and stuff. So having that happen here, it kind of brought a big discussion up.
Sure. Yeah. Which, I'm sure everyone listening that knows the video has an opinion. So basically there was a guy who was in mid of a mental breakdown, and he was running across the field and then went into the road, and he had a weapon. And he was threatening, he put it in his mouth, and he was just obviously having a mental breakdown, and he started going towards traffic.
Right.
And the police that were chasing him made the decision to put him down. Yeah.
As soon as the gun came up, I think that's when it happened. Which we did have video from earlier in the day when he was going from like house to house, like ring bell door cam videos and stuff. He was going house to house trying to go in people's houses and stuff. So it was definitely a mental health issue. But
I don't think they had another option, because you go towards citizens in the car. Before you know it, if you wait 3 seconds too long, they could shoot someone's kid.
As soon as the gun comes up, it has to go.
Yeah.
It sucks. It was a bad situation. But, it had to happen. And, there are a lot of things like that happen that we don't know about. But, not in terms of the police and stuff, but there are a lot of, we lead the nation in mental health issues, so, and obesity. So it's kind of like they don't even each other out. It's just, it's a bad mix. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If my wife's in the intersection with my kid, thanks police.
That's it. Yep.
And, people were upset about the amount of shots, but like when it becomes a situation like that, they have to ensure that the threat is gone.
Right. You got to.
And, and then people were saying like, they should have brought counselors. It's like, all this sounds great, but like there was no time.
Yeah. People don't understand. I guess they just don't understand the gravity of the situation in terms of how quickly that can change to some civilian being dead,
Sure.
So.
And then that happens, and then you got the other flip side,
right?
And everyone hates the police and this and that. It's just, there's so much gray But even still, I mean, obviously that wasn't one you brought up in humor. You were just saying, here's what happened. And then
Right.
you also posted, there was like security camera footage of this person breaking into people, like breaking into
earlier
their
in the day.
homes
Yeah,
and
he was
stuff
doing
like
some
that.
wild stuff.
So it was definitely an awful day. So as Sleazy continues to grow, you was talking to me, are you planning on like extending the forum or like?
Yeah, we'd like to do a show. That's what we've talked about for a couple of years. You know, people have asked us to do it. And when I say us, I mean, you know, people that work with me on stuff and just ideas and stuff. But they've asked me to do it. And I think that's definitely something that's been in the works for a while, but you know, we're going to see how it works out.
Heck yeah, man. That would be awesome. I think I think you could really have a lot of good conversations. I've thought about figuring out how I could interview people. Maybe I can get you to help me with this. Interview people on the street,
right?
To kind of give a voice to some of these people we see every day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's definitely something that would be good. You know, to be able to walk up to people. I've had, you know, I don't want to make it too. My thing is, you know, which I do. I talk to these people and I go out and talk to them. And I've, you know, like I said, I've had family who have been in active addiction. I've been at the travel lodge, you know, and talk to these guys but there's a lot of cool stories out there, you know, so
that's what I juggle with because I made a couple rules. I was like, well, I'm never going to, first off, have someone on who doesn't want to do it, but also active addiction is kind of something is a line that I don't really want to cross.
Yeah.
There's a show called Soft White Underbelly.
Right.
You've probably saw it.
Yeah.
And we've had some conversations about this in the past, but with people on the show, but I just don't I feel like a lot of times they're incentivized to be as depraved as possible to get, because he pays for his interviews and, you know, it's fine. But I think if you're paying an addict, obviously they're incentivized
right
to go to a certain level.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have to be careful, you know, with that, I would think. But I think that there could probably be some pretty cool stories to come out of the.
Yeah, and his work is great. I mean, the one, it's the active addiction, and then the inbred video. You've probably seen it.
Oh yeah, the Whitakers.
Yeah. That one really rubbed me the wrong way. Still does. But
you think he's taking advantage of him?
I mean, kinda.
Yeah.
And the reason being, like I know that he did a GoFundMe for him, which is great. He didn't have to do that, but that's not really any of the revenue. I mean, I'm sure he's gave him personally money too, but he really capitalized on the following that was built from that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much in
kind of what he took off with, isn't it?
I mean, I didn't hear about him till then.
Yeah. I mean, that's
just me. I mean, maybe he already had a pretty big following before that, but I feel like that really sent him into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't like, you know, the mentally ill, you know, just working in that field for so long. I just, you know, I feel protective over those people, you know, and I want to try to protect them as best as I can. And it doesn't matter, you know, I would never want to try to make money off the coattails of those people, you know.
Sure. Yeah. That's the thing too. It's like, I don't know. It just feels dirty.
It does. It does.
Know?
Yeah, it does.
But even still, we do a lot of true crime stuff and this and that. You know, I'm sure some would have different opinions on that.
Right.
So it's all kind of it's definitely a hard math problem to figure out of like, okay, well, you know, if you're religious, will this get me into heaven or you know, am I going the other way?
Right.
But I think it'd be, I mean, the more creativity we have coming out of Appalachia, the better. So
absolutely,
y'all should definitely get a show together.
Yeah. And I would really want to my whole goal is for it, and I know some people want it to be, news or what have you, but for me, I want to bring that comedy element to it, man, because it's just a sad situation. So, and I don't want to exploit people. That's a big reason why I haven't done it. I didn't want to go out here because most of the content that comes in are people who are down on their luck. So,
Sure, yeah.
Bringing those people in and maybe coming up with something a little bit different is what I was trying to do.
Do you ever, I saw the spray painted, F Sleazy News.
Right. Yeah.
A mural someone made.
Yeah.
You took a picture next to, which I love. But at the same time, like, do you have any instances where you posted a certain video that, like, say someone was going to bathroom in public?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard from someone that you've posted a video about personally?
Absolutely. I have a rule that if somebody reaches out to me and they're on Sleazy News and it's not something that's just absolutely deplorable, that I'm going to take it down. So if there's a family member who sees their kid, on the street, doing some crazy stuff and they're on dope, I'm going to take it down out of respect for the family. But with that being said, it just depends on the circumstance. If somebody's peeing in the street, that's staying up, man. Like, you can't do that around the kids. That's a big thing. There's kids going up and down the road, school buses, and you're out here stripping naked. It's crazy.
I wonder if you've ever helped someone either get help or get arrested for breaking the law.
Right.
Or
yeah, man, it's funny because I have people who come up to me and are like, man, I'm just trying to stay off the page, so absolutely. Yeah, I feel you. That's good. If that's what it's doing, let's do it, man. I want to stay off the page,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And someone commented that I posted like an upcoming we're going to have you interview, and they were like, my main goal is to stay off
right.
of Sleazy News.
Right.
Like, oh,
do it. Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it.
If it's helping people to know, and I had posted this the other day on Sleazy News that if more businesses would come to me with the footage and businesses do come to me with footage of people acting crazy, coming in to berating their employees and doing, throwing things and just acting like, really foolish. They would allow me to post that more often, I think more people would be hesitant to act up, because if they know that they're going to be called out on Facebook and there's going to be this huge group of people who are going to see them acting like a fool, they may just second guess themselves. So
yeah, it's a deterrent.
Right. That's what we want.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
That's great. And two, as we pick up more and more cases, like we're doing things about people getting scammed and different things like that. I feel like, and at the same time, you got to protect yourself too. You gotta, cause people are crazy.
Oh yeah.
You never know. So that's good. You have a rule, because I've had some really, I don't know, heartwarming moments where people reach out and they'll be like, hey, I saw you did a show about addiction. My son is going through this. Do you have any kind of resources?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah. So that's when it feels really good to do the show.
Yeah, and that I get it. And that's a big thing that happens behind the scenes. I've helped countless people find homes, to find rehab, to get off the street. I don't post these things. I don't care to post them. I don't need people to know that. But when people think that it's just, me on the page doing what I do, there's a lot that goes on that's really trying to help people, and people reach out, and that's great. If it's one person gets off the street, man, it's wonderful, So I'm happy about it.
Yeah. In the cases that you've helped with, what is the consistent values that a person needs to have to find quote unquote success in recovery? Like, do you notice a certain accountability maybe that they have? Or
accountability is a big thing, and once a lot of people come out of that brain fog that they get from just being addicted to things, then that's when you see that they kind of know at that point that this is what I need to do. And then you see the real them come out, because drugs change people. I tried to bring people, I made the mistake myself to bring people into my own home to try to help them. And it's bit me in the butt every time. So,
Really?
Yeah. But yeah, just, whenever they can start holding themselves accountable, and because most of these people are really good people, and unfortunately, we're still seeing the effects of the pill epidemic and, which led into the heroin epidemic and the fentanyl epidemic. It's just been one thing after the other for our state.
Sure. Yeah. And jackasses like the Sacklers, get to cash in their billions. They ended up paying, I don't know, $6-7 billion, but that's nothing in the
chump change.
Yeah. In the grand scale of
Scumbags.
things. But we often forget, a lot of these people got hurt on the job.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, their doctor has been told, like, take this OxyContin. This is a really good drug to alleviate pain. And then all of a sudden, they're addicted like that.
That was it. My brother was on the first wave of payments that came from suing the people who had. I'm not sure who they were. I don't know.
Was it Purdue?
May have been. It was back in 2012. So it was when they had first started throwing out lawsuits. He was like that first batch of people who had gotten on to OxyContin, and he needed it, desperately needed it. He had a spinal condition since birth, and so he needed it, and it helped him. And but once he got that settlement, 3 days later he was gone.
Oh man!
So it's like you gave this lump sum of money to people that you got addicted to your drug, and now I'm not sure how many people it could he could be one story of many. I don't know.
Sure. It says members of the family who own OxyContin. Let me see. Who own OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma, and the company itself agreed to pay up to $7.4 billion in a new settlement to lawsuits over the toll of the powerful prescription painkiller. This this was recently, and there's another one. So Kermit, you heard of Kermit, West Virginia, where they had a town of like 400 people sent like, I don't know, 9 million pain pills.
Oh yeah, it was like crazy amount,
insane amounts. And now, granted, I'm not saying, don't hold people accountable, but that's literally how a majority of these happened. Was they would get hurt at work, and then they would get on this pain medication and make them feel better, and then they'd up the dose. All of a sudden, they're hooked. They're a different person. And then when they pull it, that's when heroin came in. They had to find a way to.
It was like opening Pandora's box. You couldn't close it. And then they seen what they had done. And, our state set up, some checks and balances in the pharmacy system. And that's when I had never seen heroin. I'd never heard like anybody that was on heroin when I was growing up. And then, and I'd never seen a prostitute in Beckley, and that's something that we see now. So it's just, it's crazy that how it spiraled from that to heroin. And of course, methamphetamine, that took off pretty big, because people were addicted to Ritalin and all the other, drugs of stimulant drugs that they had gotten onto and abused. So
sure. Can you tell me, do you get a lot of posts about the rail trail? I'm trying to dive into this place.
Yeah. So not often. Sometimes I do, but I do know just a quick story with the rail trail, man. Back in like 2011, I think probably 2011, I was working on South Canal Street, and I would work midnights there. And I lived behind Ollie's at the time. And I had, I'd walk to work, and I would walk that trail every now and again. I would walk it. Actually, I was working on Park. And one night, it was about 11:30 at night. I had some headphones in. I was walking to work, and I noticed a person behind me probably about 50, 60, 70 feet. I don't know. And I just, turned around, started walking, just got this real weird feeling. Turned around, they were gone. This is in the part where there's a hill, so didn't know what happened, whatever. Next day, it was reported that there was someone stabbed and killed on the rail trail. and they think it happened at the, I think it was the person behind me, man. To this day, I swear that there was somebody, I just had that feeling like I was being watched. And, I think that they just took the person out behind me and robbed them. So,
wow.
Yeah, this has been years ago, but.
So we're saying don't go at night. Is that what
I wouldn't? I mean, I think they patrol it pretty good now, but no, not for me. I haven't been back on it.
I was thinking about doing a live stream.
Yeah.
And just riding it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, this ain't no big deal. And
This
then all
is
of a sudden I
nothing.
get tackled. Right. Or something.
Yeah. Let me go out at 11:45 at night and see what happens. Yeah. I know there's a lot of, there have been rapes and assaults and stuff out there. So, and I think it happens quite often, but I don't know for sure. It doesn't get reported. I don't hear about it. I do hear some things about things that do happen on it, but I don't know the people who, so I don't ever report on it. If I do hear something, but nobody goes on that trail that would report on it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. As far as the homeless community, how, like, is it a constantly growing issue? I don't want to say problem. I mean, obviously it's a problem, but how has that grown throughout the years, and how many exactly, like, is the homeless community a community you deal with regularly, or I'm trying to paint a picture of what that's like here.
So
Raleigh.
In my experience, that's where I kind of got the most hate from with Sleazy News, was the homeless, because at first there were a lot of posts about them like just sleeping on the side of the road and just whatever. And it was really big. There were a lot of new faces every day. So we're just coming out of winter, and once it starts warming up, we'll see what it looks like in Beckley. But I do know that there were some stuff set up to where, they couldn't use the signs as much anymore, that the police would, make a move, but I can't.
I heard something about a tax.
It's something like that. I had an officer tell me about it a couple of weeks ago, but I can't remember specifically what it was. But it did cut it down, a lot, because people were getting sick of that. But it's an ongoing issue, and my problem with that is you have families and people that live here, and new people coming in. We don't know who these people are, man, and you see that things do happen. There could be criminals that come in and could snatch a kid up. I'm not trying to be paranoid, but I just want to be on the safe side and make sure that it's not becoming where it overwhelms our system here in Beckley. And it has been, but there are some pretty good organizations set up that helps the people out, and the ones who, I would never, tell somebody they couldn't have a meal or something like that. But, it seems like they were being bussed in at one point. And I think that's because there were no ordinances in place or anything like that prevented them from panhandling. And, people were coming up here because it was an easy buck. And, Beckley is like the center of, the interstate right here. It's going up into Cleveland or Columbus and go down to Charlotte, and you can go through all this area. So that's why you see a lot of drug busts and stuff happen in this area, because they're bringing them in and they're coming into the hotels and stuff, and they're transporting it in all different directions.
Sure. How is it possible to be empathetic while remaining protective? Because, like you said, you can get, if you're overly empathetic, you can get yourself into a dangerous situation.
Right.
So how is that possible to juggle those things, to be like, well, we're going to try and help, but also protect?
Yeah, right. Got to set up those boundaries, man. You got to know what line that you don't want to cross. Like, I won't, I'll no longer let someone who's in active addiction in my home. I won't let somebody who's, trying to use me for money. But at the same time, if I'm going to help somebody, I'm going to make sure the money goes to what's going to help them immediately. And if they don't want it for that, then they want it for something else. So I feel like the community kind of has come at at this point, they're at a better understanding that, the money that they're handing out their window, it's not going to help people. I still have people who send me videos of people who are in like Harper Road panhandling, and people are handing them food and they're packing it in their bag, and their bag is completely stuffed with Chick-fil-A, 5 or 6, 7 bags of Chick-fil-A, and you can see it, in the bag when they're opening it up, because people are handing them food. They're trying to be nice, but they're not wanting food. They're wanting money. So we just have to, I just say, don't give them your money. Don't give anybody your money. Just if you want to help, you can donate to the homeless shelters here, the food pantry, the warming center, all that stuff,
Carpenter's Corner.
Yeah. Carpenter's Corner. Yeah. That's it.
And which I think are they merging with Salvation Army? There's something
over here at up on Eisner or Robert C. Byrd Drive.
Yeah, there's something going on there. I remember, and you mentioned about money. So I don't know if you call it traumatic. I still remember it like it happened yesterday. So maybe that's traumatic. I was about 4 or 5 years old. And we was in Columbus, Ohio. My dad was going to be running a marathon. And we left the hotel. And this person came up and got right in, like, uncomfortably close to my dad and just kept talking.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he disappeared. He just left. And I found out what had happened was my dad handed him money.
Right.
So it was like he was doing this kind of tactic of like making you uncomfortable until he got
right. Yeah.
His goal.
Right.
And then later that afternoon, I saw the same guy on the sidewalk under like an eave of a building, passed out drunk.
Yeah.
And it was so weird thinking about that today, because back then I didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But now I just know that, he was getting money to go buy alcohol.
Right.
He got drunk, and that was his everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sad, man. And that was the big thing for me. I didn't want my kids being exposed to that type of stuff, the school bus, that was just one incident that there was a school bus going by, and there was a girl she was heavily on something, and she was completely naked, just stripped down, just twerking, doing her thing in the middle of the street. And, you have a school bus of elementary kids, going through, they're going to get put in jail for indecent exposure. They're going to be right back out. Unfortunately, that's the way our system works. So at what point do we humiliate people and we say, hey, you look like an idiot. Here you are. Let's let everybody see what you're doing here. Most often these people don't want to do that when they're sober. So not to say that they don't, but, just holding people accountable, man. That's what I feel like needs to happen. 60 years ago, the town drunk would get kicked out of town. You know what I mean? If you were out doing this stuff in town, you were in jail, and you got kicked out of town, they would run you off. Now, as things have changed, and now we're seeing what's happened when people aren't held accountable. Yeah. I mean, they can be put in jail and everything, but they don't have any accountability with the community. So I think that this allows that to happen.
Yeah. And mentioning kids, how do you personally explain to your kids? Oh, and I don't know how old your kids are. I have a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And she's, I'm not just saying this because she's mine, but she has her mommy's brain and she's really smart.
Yeah.
And we can have conversations. Like we're watching Walking Dead right now.
Right. Yeah.
And so I find myself really trying to explain to them, okay, well, this person is struggling. I know you don't necessarily know what homeless means. Here's what it means. This person found themselves on the street.
Right.
It could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because they didn't have anyone to fall back on, and then they didn't have enough money and they got kicked out of their home. Or it could be that they made some awful decisions. They, maybe got addicted to drugs and different things.
Yeah.
So do you think that, what's the approach there? Do you be honest with your kids? I try to explain it to her in a way that doesn't make her look down on them, but also be aware of what happens when you screw up.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, man. I'm completely honest with my kids. I have older kids too, and who are adults now. And, but my younger kids, and even with my older kids, I've always been honest with this stuff, just because they're going to be exposed to it at some point, and I want them to be aware of what causes it and, what they can do to prevent it, so, it's a generational thing though, and and it's all dependent on the environment that they grow up in, I feel. But that's not for everybody. Some people get thrown into this stuff and, in a whim, they don't know, what they've gotten into, and before it's too late. So, I hope every day that doesn't happen to my kids. And I'm here to kind of guide them through that and, make them aware of what these drugs are and, this is what this looks like. You may be 13 years old, but this is what this looks like. Don't touch it. The vape pens, that's a big thing in school now. There's kids every day, not every day, but I hear about it, at least a couple times a week. And they're smoking these vape pens and they're tripping out at school. These things are coming. Most of them are coming out of a dispensary and they're high quality THC. And these kids don't know how. They're children, man. They don't know how to take it, and they're flipping out. And I know there's been a lot of people talk about vape pens in the school that have fentanyl in them and stuff like that. Most often that's not the case. Most often it's really THC, and it's too strong.
Yeah.
And these kids are greening out.
So. Oh yeah. Some of them will put you on Pluto, son.
Oh man, it's too much. No thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, at that too, I mean, the non-THC vapes, I mean, you say what you want. They're marketing these to kids. I mean, you got a Fruity Pebbles flavored vape.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Who's that marketed to?
Yeah. Not for me. No thanks.
I'm hoping that my daughter, for me, for some reason, when I was around people doing what I consider hard drugs is when someone starts crushing something up and putting stuff up their nose. Whenever I was around that, it would be the weirdest feeling. I just felt like I was watching someone commit suicide.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like for me, it's I was around a lot of growing up, teenager, dad was a biker, biker parties, just fun stuff like that. And so I was around a lot of stuff, and I never got into like really hard stuff. I tried and dabbled in things just as a teenager, just to be part of it. But I got on a really bad LSD trip when I was 18 years old, and it changed everything for me. And from that point forward, I swore off of any type of drug and anything hard. And that's about the time that the pills came in, and all of my friends went on to that, and I was too scared to go into it. And now they're dead, and LSD saved my life. So
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in high school, when people started crushing up pills in class, and I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like, we were just like, we're still kids.
Yeah.
And the life experience was so drastically different, I guess. And, they would do stuff like that. And then those people now, some of them are in horrendous shape. I'm talking they aged 3 years to one.
Every day, man. I had a friend, I'll vividly remember, we were hanging out with some adults, probably 17 years old. They were in, 30s or something. And, they pulled out a plate with some lines on it. And, my friend did it. I didn't. At this point, I was, this was after the LSD. So
right.
It would have been 18. And, he ended up getting, really addicted to pills because of that day. That was his day. And, lost, some stuff in his nasal cavity, and you can't even understand him now.
Oh, man.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
This guy was like, 4.0 GPA, really good, environment that he lived in. But it was just that one day around the wrong people that put him on a path that he couldn't get off of. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I think sometimes it does boil down to like that one decision, and sometimes it's a multitude of bad decisions and negativity. But I mean, it's do not mess with it. If you're listening and thinking about it,
say no to drugs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, call us nerds or whatever, but it's not nothing good.
So.
All right. So where can people where can people find you or find the forum? What can they do to get involved with their community? And it's specifically is it, like you mentioned, like it can be other communities too, but it's really became this Southern West Virginia.
Yeah,
thing.
it's really focused on Southern West Virginia at this point, and there are tons of resources out there. You can find them on Sleazy News. We post it, pin it, whatever. Especially like the warming centers and stuff like that. The big thing here now are, there's not a lot of property for people to get into. That's why we have a lot of homeless people, because people are afraid to rent property to people that, don't have a very good history. So hopefully we can come up with, there's a solution to that,
Dude, have you seen what rent is now?
It's crazy. It's insane, man. Like, look, I have a rental that I rent to my kids, and I'm pretty good with it for them. But I try to explain. They think it's too high, and I'm like, look at the houses around you, and find out what there's a few houses on that street that's being rented, and you've got a deal.
Yeah.
So
we had a townhouse. I think it was $1,900 a month or something like. I'm like,
dude,
how does and we've been very lucky to have a good life, good careers, all that stuff, and thankfully we could afford it. But I was just thinking, like, if I was working at Walmart still or McDonald's, because I had like entry level positions, how would I even live?
You couldn't, man.
There's no way.
Like, there's people working at Walmart now making $900 every 2 weeks. How do you live on $1,800 a month? I couldn't. But I look back, 15 years ago, I was making $875 an hour and living in a small $600 a month house, made it, but lucky enough to have been able to live in a time that was, I could live in something, with that type of.
Yeah. Well, I remember if I had $100 saved, I was like, yes.
Yeah. I never had money saved, man. I lived the struggle for a long time. Yeah. And it's just, most of it's my own doing, but I got out of it.
Oh yeah. And I wonder too, like, okay, if I make my daughter's life too comfortable, is that going to mess her up as an adult? Is she going to be able to pay her car payment?
Yeah.
How do we juggle that?
Yeah.
Because basically, I had a great family on my mom's side. There were good people on my dad's side too, but my dad went out of the picture when I was about 9, and I think, really not having a choice than to make it helped me.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, I'm like, of course I want my daughter to have a good life, but at the same time, is she gonna ask me to pay her car payment when she's 25?
How do you set them up to succeed? That's a big reason why I did what, with the rental for my kids, to kind of give them a chance to get through college, but at the same time learn how to juggle those finances and know, a little bit of the struggle. But it's definitely, the more money you make, the more you want to spoil your child. That's the way I feel about it. But there has to be that, that medium that you don't.
Yeah, let's have 38 Christmases a year. This is awesome.
Yeah, man.
It's St. Patrick's Day. Let's get her
let's have a party. Why not? Let's
something from the Leprechaun.
Yeah. That's so silly to me. People like Easter. I'm seeing people post Easter pictures of presents. Why are we giving?
I know,
presents,
dude.
man?
I'm guilty. I'm telling you. I'm trying to not do it.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, it's gonna make her day. But at the same time, what is she gonna do when she realizes, like, oh, you mean I don't get 20 Christmases a year?
Yeah.
I actually have, like, a power bill is $700 in the winter.
Yeah, man. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
That's like the trunk or treats. I won't take my kids to those, man, because I feel like it takes away from Halloween.
The whole thing.
Yeah. I want my kids to experience that one night dressing up and just seeing other kids dressed up and going house to house, but kind of defeats the purpose if you're doing 15 different trunk or treats.
Yeah.
And they've got 17 pounds of candy at home. So
we should set up a trunk or treat on the rail trail this year.
Let's do it. I like it. That's a good idea. I think
We need a friendlier face on it.
Yeah, it would just be me, but just chilling, waiting to give out candy to the homeless, I guess. Yeah.
Oh man.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you for coming on,
sir.
Shane. Y'all be sure to follow Sleazy News. Join the group on Facebook. There's some really great things going on. And for everyone else, be sure to like this video. Be sure to subscribe to Creepalachia on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version only on Apple or Spotify, please leave a review. Takes you minimal time and does so much to help the show get found. And don't forget, we do have TikTok. We are on Facebook. A huge community is growing there. And above all else, always remember, everyone, long live Appalachia.